Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Perspectives. Welcome to October as well. It is Monday, October 4th, 2021. We are beginning the third quarter of 2021. Could you believe it? Yeah, it's real. It's true. Trust everyone waking up in fine spirits this morning, coming off our fourth no movement weekend, and we're all moving in fine style. Hope so. Of course, the weekend we had some losses again. Due to COVID, and we want to extend our deepest condolences to family, friends, co-workers, everyone who deep in mourning of the individuals who passed last weekend. I am Brenda Baptiste. Welcome to our program. I'd like to thank all the broadcast entities who are streaming this program live. MTV on air and online. Thank you very much, MTV. Mikey Live, TNR Communications, our own Perspectives page, Partygrenada, a sister isle in Carriacou. And this morning, because we have a government minister as our special guest panelist, we will be streamed live on the GIS. So that's just a programming note because of the interview with the government minister this morning. And that special guest panelist and government minister will be our Minister for Education, the Honorable Emmalin Pierre. It's now a pleasure to introduce our special talk panel of Senator Christopher Allie and Mr. Byron Campbell. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Brenda.
Mr. Campbell, it's really nice to see you in the flesh again, to feel your energy, to, yeah.
Always my pleasure, always my pleasure. And I did miss you guys, doing it via Zoom electronically, it's not the same,
No.
as the flesh and blood, but...
Can you well imagine what our children are going through? Anyway, we'll get to that.
You get to that.
So, morning to the viewers and the listeners. It's a pleasure to be here again. And, we...
Like your shirt. Nice color. Yeah,
thank you. Say pink.
It's pink,
in touch with the other side.
They say real men wear pink,
Yeah.
What I mean.
I know that.
Yeah.
Byron will tell us. Well, it was good. Another no movement weekend. I suppose folks like me get an opportunity to stay home and catch up on things that was outstanding for a while. Wifey would have the list prepared, so you try to walk it through and get those things done. So yes, that's positive, and you got time to go to your garden and do little things after being encouraged by Byron over the months. So I am following up with that part of it. So that's a necessary aspect of it too. But outside of that, I think we're getting to a point where, we need to get some adjustments. The figures are looking good. The curve has flattened. It is heading south.
Flattening.
I think it's going down. When you look at our averages, 6 to 1 versus 117 prior week to this week. So we're going down. We've now stopped flattening. Our debts as well. The debts rate, average of 8. Now we're down to an average of 4.5. So in positive territory, I believe in that this curfew and the lockdown weekends have helped, and that is something we could discuss a little more later. But I want to highlight early the impact on businesses, because I know a lot of businesses have been shut for a month now, small and medium and micro. So, it is hard on them. People probably have not gotten paid because of what has happened in September and into October. So it is going to be a difficult scenario going forward and keeping them locked as we have. So I think that's something we need to discuss as well. So opening, I don't know about any other news, Byron, any other positive?
Yeah, definitely, Chris. But just to elaborate on the numbers, Chris, it means that our positive cases are now under 1,000 overall. So that's really very good.
And the recovery rate has been very good.
And the test positivity rate is under 10.
Yeah.
In other words, so that's really good. Under 10%, I think, is excellent. But I think there's some good news in the whole vaccine management globally. We heard that, is it Morrick, antiviral pill, that is now certainly going to, the FDA is like to give emergency, approved for emergency use. That's apparently going to cut, and that's not to prevent, this is for management if you have the virus in terms of hospitalization and getting very sick. So that's good news. But Chris, I want to talk a little bit about the annual consultation, budget consultation. I think you're part of it. But I was in health and wellness, and one point came up. I'd like to test your mind on this. It was proposed in this breakout room that given COVID and what's happening and the need for more investment, parallel investment to existing health expenditure, that resources from the CBI be directed for some time for investment to bring our health to where it needs to be, like the health insurance scheme and some of the resources that would be necessary going forward to management. That some of these resources for a year or two should be directed towards health. What do you think?
Well,
as someone who's familiar with the program.
There's two aspects. There's a National Transformation Fund that CBI supports.
Yeah.
The National Transformation Fund can be used as directed by Cabinet for priority areas where they see there is need. Community centers,
Right.
bridges,
Yeah.
infrastructural works.
Yeah.
Health and wellness could be one. So
Okay.
the government could decide that because the public health issue and the state of readiness of our hospitals, the major ones, that there is need to divert some level of funding there. So that can be used, and the NTF could be used, the funds from the to strengthen the areas in public health that are weak or tending to be weak. I mean, the major area in public health, of course, is personnel. That don't personnel, you have equipment and the administration is a major issue, but personnel to me is more significant, getting the right nurses, the people, the doctors and so on too. And of course, maintenance. We ignore the maintenance part of the public health systems and the equipment and this and
Because
that.
as you talk about personnel,
So
this came up, the question of retainment. How do you retain your personnel? How do you, in terms of benefits, that was a big issue. How do we...
good packages.
How do we keep them? Exactly, good packages.
And I mean, the reality of it is we can't compete with the US and England in terms of pay and financials.
Yeah.
But what we could compete in, I always say, is that we could appeal to people's national pride.
Yeah.
Apart from that, and people will say, oh, that doesn't put money in my pocket. But there are other initiatives. I remember years ago, Byron, public servants used to have priority for housing. They used to have priority for buying a land. They used to have priority for a number of things.
I mean, training, all of that,
Yeah.
leadership,
Incentives,
all these
so
things.
the incentive doesn't always have to be monetary.
No.
It can always be these type of things that you could look at to keep staff here, because, regardless of what you see, the average person who lives in this country would prefer to stay here, I think, and work here, because you're in your own environment, you're in your own culture, you have your security of your friends and your family, so it's easier here than to resettle somewhere else. So it is always in my view that is not a big thing. I think the real issue is how we remunerate either directly or indirectly, and how and people are reasonable, I think.
Yeah, there have to be incentives. When I talk about packaging, it's not just salary. Really and truly, money is just part of a structure. Sometimes you're well paid and the whole situation is not ideal in terms of both your professional and personal development and the value you add to an organization also. And so things like training, people in the public health system must know that they can go on to get scholarships. I must feel that if I join at some point, I must see the ladder up for upward mobility. Am I just going to work hard, get qualified, keep performing well on my performance appraisals, and then when it's time to get a promotion because someone was in the system 20 years before me, they jump ahead before me? So all of these things, I think that we need to look at when we talk about package, and so on, because it's no longer about just receiving that paycheck. It's just about how, adding value both to you, the employee, and the employer, because it's a relationship. So that's very important that we look at that.
The other part of the CBI, I think, that can be leveraged as well is the fact that, in the credit union, we talk about the bond. You know what the bond is?
Yes.
Who you're coming, you don't have to, like teachers credit union used to be only teachers before.
Yes.
When you expand the bond, you can bring in anybody. I think CBI, if I want of a different word, could use the bond. We specialize, CBI is specialized into accommodation and that type of, and that's where you see a lot of the investments are now. But if we expand that and we go into health and wellness, medical tourism, there is a lot of room. So somebody wants to come to Grenada to open up a clinic to do, this surgery, the surgery where to fix your face and plastic surgery.
Plastic surgery.
Right, so you want to do plastic surgery and you come and you recover here after you do a procedure and so on. That is an area where you could attract investors from a diaspora or own Grenadian people. We have a lot of specialists out there, doctors and so on.
As you talk
that
about
kind
it,
of service is a big deal
Yeah.
in places like the Cayman Islands,
Right.
and
So-
the investments are from things like
so we
CBI
can
programs.
expand it
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
and even agriculture.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say that we were in a form of agriculture in CBI when there was a fish farm and that didn't do well.
Yeah.
But you change the model, you learn from those mistakes, and you
Yeah.
see
Move
how you
on,
could
yeah.
develop
But we need
it.
more. We need the expertise from a CBI investment or from a first world agricultural spectrum, because we cannot continue to do agriculture the way we're doing it.
Yeah.
Our climate,
Yeah.
And that
resource,
actually came up in our
training,
committee as
personnel,
well.
and
It
all
did.
of that.
Yes,
It
like
did.
our committee
So,
had to deal with
yeah.
investment flows.
Yeah.
And that came up, how we could do it, and the
Yeah.
CBI was mentioned significantly in that. And the last thing I would say about CBI that we haven't leveraged well, we have a lot of personalities who are citizens of Grenada through CBI, and I am talking about real high flyers, billionaires, who are citizens of Grenada
Yeah.
in various industries, in ICT, in various industries.
Leveraging.
Yes,
Yeah.
we have, I think, the second or the third highest person in Microsoft is a citizen of Grenada.
Yeah.
And we have women and men of that caliber that we could probably pool and bring together to help, see how we could help and help them, how they could help us leverage certain things. I have said, our Prime Minister, we just need to list 3 or 4 projects that we think is pivotal to our country, that will change how we see things, whether it is in ICT, whether it is in education, what it is we could do different. That if we could bring these projects to a grouping of that, of these 5 or 10 people, and say to them, guys, how you think we could fashion this, do this, help finance it?
So bottom line, there are possibilities there.
Great possibilities.
Yeah.
I think
One
we
thing
just need to leverage differently.
One thing I'm interested to know from you gentlemen, though, as the budget consultations go on, and I've just kind of dropped in on one last week. It's kind of busy. I dropped in. Richard Duncan was presenting at the time. So I just got about 10 minutes of that, and then I had to go out. But and I'm sure, but both of you have followed it more than I
we were
did.
part of it.
So, right, exactly. So the question is really, in these consultations, where are we going? Are we addressing a Grenada pre-COVID, or are we addressing a Grenada post-COVID? And you both know I'm asking this question because there are a lot of things that are in a pre-COVID Grenada that will no longer serve us in a post-COVID Grenada. So as you are in these consultations, gentlemen, what's the newness? What is coming up? Because really, education, health, even the way we interact with each other, that's gone. So is this budget consultation
let's
addressing a
Let's start
post-COVID
with 2 things you
Grenada?
just mentioned, education and health.
Yeah.
Right? In the consultation, that was something that was highlighted.
Yeah.
Government, when Minister of Finance Gregory Bowen had did his speech, he indicated that those were 2 sectors or 2 areas that is going to be prioritized. Right? Because pre-COVID education, post-COVID is 2 different.
Of course.
Similarly, health. So you will see, I presume government is going to put some emphasis on those 2 particular areas.
But are you feeling it in the
I
consultations?
agree. Well, just the consultation itself. I mean, here we have consultation via Zoom.
Right.
And I'm impressed that over 200 persons
right.
participated.
Right.
So by itself. So definitely, Brenda, you think, because it's a new world, it's a new environment. In fact, what you heard the Prime Minister said, look, we need to re-engineer, rethink.
Good word.
health.
Good word.
In other words, it's not business as usual. So you're looking for creativity. Attitudes have changed. Business have changed. So much have changed. So particularly if you look at the health sector, for example, you have to think differently.
Yeah.
It can't be business as usual.
No.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going to put a pause on our little buzzing session here this morning, and we'll come back at the end with it. So our special guest panelist this morning is our Minister for Education, the Honorable Emmalin Pierre. I'm sure folks are very interested in knowing a lot of what is happening with education. So we take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
For persons with symptoms of COVID-19, Testing is done within 5 days of the start of symptoms using a SARS-CoV-2 antigen test. If the result is positive, individuals are required to isolate for 14 days. Day 1 of isolation is the day of confirmation with a positive test. Retesting is not required for release from isolation. Once persons complete the required 14-day isolation, they can resume normal activities, observing routine public health protocols. If the result is negative, a PCR test will be done for confirmation. If the PCR test is positive, the individual is required to isolate for 14 days as above. If the PCR test is negative, the individual will be released from quarantine and can resume normal activities observing routine public health protocols.
Well, welcome back to Perspectives. And in addition to all the broadcast entities that stream us every Monday morning, this morning is a pleasure for us to say welcome to viewers on the GIS. Just so the viewing public, you are aware, whenever we have a government minister as part of our guest panel, it will be streamed live on the GIS, just in case you're wondering. Well, this morning it is a pleasure to introduce as our special guest panelist, the Honorable Emmalin Pierre. She is the parliamentary representative for St. Andrews Southeast and our Minister for Education, Information and Ecclesiastic Affairs. Good morning, Minister Pierre.
Good morning, Brenda. Good morning to your panel. I want to say how pleased I am to have this opportunity to be with you guys.
Well, we're very pleased to have you here as well. I think I should say thanks for waking up early. It's Monday morning, so you should have risen very early because you have a special date every Monday, right?
Of course.
All right. So, Minister, we enter term one of the school year. I think that is 14 weeks. Here we are in a very unusual circumstance because of the mighty COVID. And so in terms of what is happening with school, online, attendance, that sort of thing, the infrastructure of school at the moment, could you just share some of that with us?
So Brenda, I want to first say a special morning to all of your viewers and listeners. And to say I'm quite sure that we are all aware of the challenges that we face at this time and the fact that we've adopted an online mode for teaching and learning to be able to deal with the current challenges of COVID-19. During this pandemic, from March last year to date, we've established within the education sector and together with our stakeholders 3 different modes of operations. And those modes of operations are online, full online, blended approach, meaning online and face-to-face, or total face-to-face. So we are currently in the total online mode of teaching and learning.
Okay. The pandemic, I think it is fair to say as we look across the world that it has kind of worsened the situation in terms of especially this second part of what's happening with it for the world, but our first wave. So I think it is fair to say that learning has worsened somewhat in terms of the classroom engagement, students needing, that extra time to be outside and to engage with each other and so on. What are you hearing from your principals, your parents, students? What are you hearing from people about that?
Brenda, I would make a comparison between last year and this year. And last year, maybe in the middle of all that was happening, Experts were extremely concerned about education. As a matter of fact, you started to hear terms like generational catastrophe, meaning if we continue like this. Now, at that time, Grenada was not experiencing what the world was experiencing. So, of course, it was a major concern for us then, but you're absolutely right. The situation has worsened. And so our concern at this time would be even greater. Of course, all of our stakeholders are concerned as we are. Students are missing significant contact time, and not just that they're missing now, but they have lost so much already. And not just contact time in terms of the academics, but remember, school is about a lot more than we sometimes make it out to be.
Yeah.
So we're talking about all the morals and the values and the civics and all of those things that may not be totally academic, math and science, those things that prepare a child for life. They're missing that as well. And of course, if we're going to add up, the loss, we have to look at how this loss is going to impact society, not just today, not just for exams coming up, because sometimes that's what we tend to view, a very limited view. But if we look down the road, way down the road, what is happening now, what has happened last year, it must affect us in a significant way, and we have to minimize that effect as much as possible. And so all of our stakeholders, principals, teachers, everyone is concerned. And of course, we do our best amidst the situation to minimize the risk, to minimize the possible effect of all of this. And we just have to continue to do all that is possible in that regard.
Right. Talking about minimizing risk and all of that, I'm sure the national community is eager to know, when will there be a return to physical interaction, or what we call face-to-face in the classroom? Who takes that decision, Minister? And just what will be involved in that decision-making process? What are the factors are you going to consider?
It's a question the average person would ask. As to whether there is a date, of course, we don't have a date at this time that we've agreed upon. Who makes that decision? Guided by the Ministry of Health, the Cabinet of Grenada makes a final decision as it relates to the opening and the reopening of school. And that is so because we're in a crisis, we're in a pandemic. It's not normal time. Sometimes the law says the Minister for Education decides that, but under the special circumstances, of course, we have to be guided in a different way. And so we await the guidance. And let me just probably give a hint as to what determines that final decision. Of course, primary is the risks that are related to COVID-19. So when you measure the risk right now, and probably there's cabinet today, so I don't want to anticipate what cabinet would say today. But if you went back as last week, Monday, for example, when you weigh the risk of what is possible, if you are going to send out as many as 30,000 additional persons moving about every day, that risk was too high, right? Right. But that is not the only risk that is considered. That is not the only factor. That's not the only variable. So you have COVID, and I remember at some point earlier this year, when a decision was made, we are going back to school, some persons were concerned and they said, well, we still have COVID. Why are we opening school? And that is where the other variables come in. So you monitor the risk as it relates to COVID-19. And when you get that down to a reasonable rate that you believe, you can consider the other variables, such as the level of loss of education and the possible impact of that on the child and the society. And then you also consider the safety and the well-being of children, because at some point you're going to reach that level where the risk of COVID-19 is lower than the risk that is there as it relates to the safety and the well-being of the child, right? And of course, now with vaccination, I'm sure into that would also fit the level of immunity. So there are a lot of variables that one will have to consider when making that final decision. But what I can say to you, Brenda, is that the conversation has started. How are we going? Because it's different. It's totally different now. How are we going to roll out the reopening? It's not the same as last year, August. And so there are a lot more factors to be considered. And very soon we will be speaking to the public in that regard. Let me just plug in here, Brenda, that I've already gotten calls, for example, from a couple private schools to say to me, Minister, we are very small. Our numbers are very small. Our parents are vaccinated. Our teachers are vaccinated. Most of our students are vaccinated. What prevents us from face-to-face?
Right.
So a conversation we did not have last year, very different. And so we are looking at all of the factors and we are monitoring the level of risk. As you stated before, the numbers are going down, but there's still a major risk. And we are going to be having some added discussion at Cabinet today on that particular subject.
All right. Senator Allie?
Yeah, Minister, I want to take off again on where you left off with that issue of risk and managing the risk. And you know, when we introduced Pfizer into Grenada, I know part of the conversation was obviously to see how we could encourage our children between 12 and 17 to get vaccinated, including our teachers and, as you say, parents, where the case may be, so that we could reduce the risk for our students and that which is primarily our secondary school students, and see how we could get them to come back to face-to-face. I do agree with you that, you know, there's a significant loss in other aspects of education apart from just the traditional academics with the subject areas. So is there any special mandate, and that word probably is a bad word to use now, but you know, is there any special consideration that we are looking at as a government and as a people, whether or not we need to push or in some cases insist that our teachers and our students get vaccinated and we have a vaccine that is available, that is safe for them? So is there a thinking that in order to get back, even though to some form of blended learning where we have the face-to-face, is that some consideration that is being looked at by Cabinet and the government?
Well, I'll give you the assurance that mandate and mandatory is probably an inch away, so you may get away with that. But just to make the point that we cannot now, in October 2021, speak about the reopening of school and not have the conversation about vaccination, right? Everywhere in the world, that conversation is taking place as well. My two children who are within the age of vaccination, the very first opportunity that I had, they took the Pfizer vaccine, and they're ready, whatever decision is made as it relates to the reopening of school. I'll just give another example. Last week Saturday, I was in Soubise, where the vaccination campaign was in that community. I'm not going to call her name, but the parent all the way from Balthazar drove to Soubise to try to get her son vaccinated. And she said to me, she's preparing for the return to school because she wants to make sure that her son has a level of immunity for whenever these hundreds of children start interacting again. Remember, at one point we were dealing with COVID-19, and remember at another point we're dealing with other variants of COVID-19, and we don't know what variant we're going to be dealing with by the time we reopen school. And so this conversation is extremely important. I met with the Grenada Union of Teachers about a month ago, and one of my appeal to them was to encourage teachers, and note my word, encourage teachers to the best of their ability to ensure that they are prepared for the reopening of school. Should we make a decision now as it relates to the opening of school, that teachers would feel far more comfortable and safe returning in an environment, whether it's low risk or medium risk, that level of immunity would give them a level of comfort, a degree of comfort. And it's the same thing for parents. We have been encouraging parents during this period, ensure that you take your children who are within the age for vaccination to get vaccinated, because we believe we believe very strongly that the level of immunity you're going to get from the vaccination is going to be a plus for both teachers and students returning to the classroom. So as it relates to what the final decision on that is, there's no final decision on the how. For example, if we are going to reopen, every single time we did that before in the past, we've done so in phases, every single occasion. Whether we say forms 5s first, whatever we said. Now, you have to also bring into the equation right now the issue of vaccination. How are we treating children who are vaccinated for the return of schools? So let us just imagine, for example, we are going with the same mode that we went 1 year ago, which is we are going to allow the students who are preparing for exams to return first. Now, someone may argue, of course, yes, we understand the importance of preparation for the exam, but what about my child who is fully vaccinated and is prepared to go out there? And so it is a different conversation, and we will be alerting the public as to government's final decision as it relates to vaccination, students and teachers, and the reopening of school.
And a related question to that, Minister, is the role of the PTAs in the various schools and how we see ourselves involving the PTAs to help with the vaccination, but also to help with the psychoanalysis and the psychometrics of our students. For example, you mentioned the aspect of the social side. There's no sporting activities. There's no release for all that energy in our young people. How do we see ourselves involving the PTAs to, first of all, help us with the vaccination drive? Some parents believe that vaccination of their children must be mandated. And I know, government is going to have to tread carefully on that. But the issue of how do we involve our PTAs more and more? PTAs, to me, now take a more central role in this COVID crisis where, prior to that, they were primarily about the academics of the children and meeting the teachers and understanding where your child is and so on the academic side. Now I think it is far more than that. And we see the Ministry of Education playing a pivotal role in energizing these PTAs or getting them to a point where they could really assist us and the children of that age to get vaccinated and to, of course, look at how we deal with the mental and emotional side of the child.
Of course, parent-teachers associations are always very important for the well-being, the growth, the advancement, development of institutions, particularly our schools. And so I totally agree with you that they are an important stakeholder in this particular situation. And I can give you the assurance, we have been working with principals, supporting our principals to run schools as close to normal as possible, albeit we are in a virtual space. And so most of our schools have been having their PTA meetings online, their class meeting online, and all of that is actually part of the operation in the virtual space. I also want to make the point too, that even in the last few weeks, you would not believe it, but even in this period of COVID, the Ministry of Education has been working with some districts to ensure that their PTA executive elections and so on took place because of the important role that they can play. So we are in the process of arranging those online sessions, continuing actually because we have been engaging parents, and of course using the school's PTA sessions to reach parents as well is one of the areas of target as it relates to this current situation.
My last question to you, Minister, is on the uptake of teachers in this new virtual environment and how they need to adjust their presentation of lectures to the students in a virtual world. I was a student of that not too long ago, and I know the presentation by the lecturers and the teachers have to be so different. We are accustomed to getting handouts, physical handouts, and reading in a horizontal format. Now everything is vertical. And I know our children are more inclined to do that, but how is our teachers and what is the ministry doing to to accommodate our teachers, those of them who have an issue with that, and the technology and the changes? How is your ministry managing that as you go forward to get the teachers to get seamless in terms of how they present their work, and it is so going to be so different in what they do in that digital sphere?
Very important, very, very critical. As a matter of fact, it reminds me of where we started, March last year. I remember when we announced online teaching and learning, the response generally was, how are we going to do this? We never did this before. We don't know how to do this. And so we sat down and had to now come up with, what do we recommend as the across the board method that every teacher would be able to use? And some persons criticized the ministry when we said, engage through WhatsApp. And most persons did not understand, because we had already captured the data to realize that talking Zoom and all those other things was going to be a foreign language for most people. So we said, if that's all you can do to communicate with parents and students, to send messages, start there. But immediately we launched a training program for teachers. And that training program targeted teachers from the very basic, knowing your device from the very basic. And you would be amazed where we were in March last year. And so that training continued then, ongoing training until now. As a matter of fact, we pulled out 6 of our top IT teachers in the schools. We made them into district training officers, and they have been leading the charge as it relates to training at the district level. Some people have moved from basic to intermediate. Some people have moved from intermediate to advanced. And so that training continues, and especially to address that issue that you're speaking about. So it's not just because before you can determine what are those attractive ways that you can present that lesson, you must know how to first use the device. So we start persons from there and take them all the way out up to using all of those fancy apps and all of those fancy programs that can capture students' attention and can help in terms of the speed at which they learn things and the interest that they keep in learning things. And what was the results of that? What I admired in July of this year was when we said, July last year, I'm sorry, we said that persons are tired. Normally around that time, you have what is called personal development training, where teachers into a face-to-face setting. Of course, we could not do that. And so the ministry presented teachers with an option, a choice to choose to sign up, to register for the online training to continue during those times. And the option was that you did nothing during that time. And I was amazed at the number, the hundreds of teachers who chose that they wanted to continue their training, and they participated, graduated from that session. So the ongoing session, and most of you are old enough to remember the days of the revolution, the in-service knee step program on Fridays, we've adopted that style for the training of teachers as it relates to e-learning. And we have been seeing significant development in that regard. Interest and development.
Mr. Campbell?
Minister, again, pleasant good morning. And I'm very pleased that we're having this conversation on the education system, on education, because we tend to look at more the economics, the employment, but education is serious, and this is one of the areas that is being affected. And the online learning, this helps, but we know that education is more than just the online learning, the sports, the extracurricular activities, the interfacing, the one-on-one, the children getting together. So that's important. So, and as you said, we'll only get back to the classroom in terms of what is determining in the risk factor. And I know that factors you're taking into consideration testing, improved ventilation, things like mask wearing, some distancing when indoors, and a number of factors. But clearly, vaccination is, and it remains, and not just Grenada, but globally, a critical factor in managing pandemic, particularly within the education and schools systems, because you talked about 30,000 young people going back to school, gathering, and so that's a major risk when you have community spread and the likelihood that the virus is going to be with us for a while. So the question is, how are we going to protect our children? How are we going to protect the families? How are we going to protect the children under 12 that are not able to be vaccinated? Protecting the whole entire school population? I mean, for me, and that's my view, by the way, that it seemed to me that a job requirement must be vaccination for teachers and people that are employed in this sector. I mean, how are we, and the question is, how are we, what are the specific measures are we going to implement to ensure that we have a safe environment? And vaccination is clearly one. And I know, Chris, you talk about this, you don't want to hear the word mandatory, but I don't want to use the word mandatory, but a job requirement. Minister.
I would say, Campbell, having a conversation about the reopening of school and not speaking vaccination is like taking off on a flight with an intention to crash. That's the first.
I like that. Yeah.
It's like taking off and you on the runway and you know that you're preparing to crash as soon as you get over Simone somewhere there. Yeah. So we cannot hide from the fact. We cannot miss the conversation of vaccination with the reopening. Let us just be practical. Before we had the Delta variant in Grenada, before that, you observe what happened in a school environment. I went to a school for a function and I left prematurely. And the reason I left prematurely was because I got very uncomfortable with what I saw happening as it relates to the observing of the protocols, both students and teachers. Now, we can have that conversation in a vacuum, but we have to be real. We are social beings, and our children more so. That's right. They really don't understand all this thing about 6 feet and keeping your mask on all day. My son said to me one day, Mommy, I thought the teacher was supposed to stay 6 feet away, you know, and remove her mask if she's 6. That's what the protocol says. But realistically, in a classroom setting, you expect a teacher to stand in front of the room like a robot, not move, well, even robots move, but to stand there, not move, or to constantly be reminding herself that I have to stay 6 feet away from the child. But let us imagine an accident happens. You know, do you expect that teacher to maintain that same level of consciousness? Or do you expect that she will or he will always maintain that level of consciousness when dealing with that student who fell sick? So the reality is this, that one, when it comes to the resources, we have deployed over 400 people, significant cost to the government of Grenada, to assist schools in keeping a clean and safe environment. This is unsustainable. It is unsustainable because last term, we had to use from the funds for school feeding. And I'm not sure what was going to happen if school actually opened in September. That's just the facts. That's the reality. You look at what happened with the supplementary budget. We had to be going to beg for additional monies to put into school feeding because we had to ensure to keep the classrooms clean, to keep the environment clean. We had to dip somewhere. That's the only place that we had funds at the time. So the reality is that this is a very costly venture. Can we reduce cost? Yes. Can we make the environment safer? Yes. And so if we are going to have the conversation of return, and I'm speaking about over 30,000 people boarding the buses, moving in St. George's, in and out of classroom, in the play field, you know, walking the streets of St. George's. People call me, Minister, I see a group of students on the bus terminals, they're not wearing masks. What am I supposed to do, right? The reality is, even if you have all the protocols, It's like the laws we have on the book, wear your seatbelt while driving. Do a survey of how many people actually wear a seatbelt. So if we have to reduce risk, we have to have the conversation of vaccination.
Yeah, a conversation sounds for me, Minister, like we're talking this through, but I think it must be understood, and we can look around and see what's happening globally, whether it's in Europe and the US, as close as Puerto Rico, have instituted mandatory vaccination for all education employees within the school system, because they recognize clearly that if we're going to have a congregation of children interfacing and moving, as the minister described it there, vaccination become a job requirement. And so we have to engage the unions. I mean, that's my view, to say, look, this is the way forward. There's no other way. If you're going to be exempted, well, we're going to have weekly testing. But clearly, when I go into a room, or if my child goes into a room, I want to know that everyone else there is vaccinated. Because that child is taking that virus home to the elderly, to the grandmother, to the extended family. So it's not only protecting those in the schools, but protecting those at home.
Right.
So it's critical.
And it's not just the teacher and the student and the ministry, but parents are an integral part of this. And as Senator Allie brought up the parent injection, I'll just share some parent feedback here on Facebook, Minister. One parent is saying it, but if one parent is saying it, I'm sure other parents are thinking it. She's saying, making it mandatory is a must. My son is vaccinated, and it will not be fair to my son to sit in a classroom with students that are not vaccinated. He is asthmatic, and I am not taking that chance. People need to wise up. She goes on. Just as there were days to distribute the devices, the same approach can be used now to identify days for each school to vaccinate the students once they have the age. She says the COVID is no joke. And without the government making it mandatory, lots of children will not get it because their parents are against it. Time to make the decision right now. Vaccination is a must. As a parent, I ain't playing. And that's some feedback on Facebook, Minister. What say you?
Yeah.
That parent understands. Brenda, with the current situation, there is no way that students with underlying condition would see a classroom right now if they are not fully vaccinated. It will be a crime to do so. Because if you take these students, and we sometimes think that people with underlying condition are senior people, we have many of our students, unfortunately, asthma, high blood pressure, diabetes. It is real, unfortunately, right? And so the question is, are you going to deny these students an opportunity for an education for how long? But let me just plug in, Brenda, another aspect of this, and why vaccination is extremely important at this point in the conversation. And I'm using the word conversation deliberately, Mr. Campbell, bear with me. Now the question is, how satisfied are we with the performance of teachers and online learning right now? And let me add to that question. How satisfied are we with the parents and the supervision of online learning right now? How satisfied are we that students are actually logging into classrooms and are actually participating fully in classes at this time?
Right.
And that is the same reason.
I'll just follow up though, as you preempted me and asked the questions, because that's where I was going. I was going to go there.
And I won't say to you, don't go there. Do not go there.
But I'm a rebel, right? So when I'm told not to, I do the opposite.
You will.
Right.
No,
so let's go there. On a serious note, let's go there. I'm glad you raised it. That was my next question, actually. Are we satisfied, or how are we monitoring teachers' attendance online at this point in time? Do you have any scientific data? How is the ministry tracking that? Also, students, Are we tracking their attendance online? How are they doing? And not just whether teachers show up or whether students show up, and parent supervision, critical, Minister. Also, things like their comfort levels.
Yeah.
Are we satisfied that the teachers, like, how are we finding that there are teachers who are just not comfortable? Excuse me, not COVID. Not comfortable looking into a camera. A student not comfortable looking into a camera. Access, Minister. How many students are Wi-Fi, data, devices? Questions.
Many questions. So Brenda, let me use. I always believe the greatest litmus test for a minister for education is when you have students in the education system. So you see firsthand certain things and you experience certain things yourself. So on a day when I am actually working from home, I observe my own children and I rate them pretty much disciplined in that regard, particularly the one in secondary school. And I observe him going from class to class to class almost for the entire day. And he doesn't require much in terms of anybody instructing him for two reasons. One, he's pretty much disciplined. And two, you can see the level of management and organization from that school system. You can see it is very visible. Now, let us just accept the fact that every school does not have the exact same level of management and the quality of leadership. It's not across the board. And online teaching and learning is very much connected to management, leadership, organization. Systems become extremely important, right? So, number one, if you have a situation where school doesn't get it right, what happens? Who is affected? That's the first question. If you have a situation where the teachers don't all do what they're supposed to do, of course it doesn't work perfectly. And if you have a situation where the students don't show up or they don't participate, it could never work well. Or a case where the parent doesn't care. So all of those factors must come together for an effective e-learning program,
right,
for an effective online program. There are so many moving pieces to make it work that no one factor. But you ask about statistics and data, I love that, right? Now, right now, and I don't want us to make a conclusion, so I'm going to sound like a theorist that says this data there don't draw any final conclusion.
Okay.
So right now, the data that we have, preliminary data, which requires every teacher to submit their report as it relates to the online engagement with students. Absolutely right. How many students did you engage today? Who was absent? Who was present? Are you noticing any trend of any particular student that is constantly absent? What is the level of engagement? All of this data to inform decision making, right? And to inform other things as well. Right now, unfortunately, data collected is representing about 40%. About 40% of our teaching population. Now, I said before I started, before I got to the point, that we're not going to be conclusive, because what we are going to do as a first response is to engage principals this week. Is there a reason why data is not in? Is it that the data is available but not submitted, right?
Okay.
So I'm not drawing any conclusion from that.
So you have other variables.
Except to say that this data, of course, is going to tell us a lot. Mm-hmm. And the lot that it's going to tell us, I can tell you even right now, some of what it's going to tell us, that many of our students might not be fully engaged. Not that they don't have a device, but they probably don't have the supervision. A child where the mother is out all day, or a child where the mother just can't be bothered about this education thing, are we going to continue the online for that child forever?
Right.
What if a new variant comes next week? What's going to happen to the education of that child? What kind of citizen would that child end up being? What kind of contribution will that child make to society?
Right.
And so this is why it is extremely urgent that a final decision on the rollout of the reopening of school be taken and announced, and we start to look seriously at how we are going to do so. And I would say this, vaccination must be a critical variable in the reopening of school. Must.
Right, as the parents as well. Let's just not forget those who have to work, and so in the supervisory roles. It's not that they might be complicit. It might be that going to work and all of that gets in the way of what happens with children. But Minister, in terms of access to data, access to Wi-Fi for students in the online, what is that like? What is the management of that? Accessibility, talk to us about that.
So accessibility, let me start with the school. We have addressed that issue in that all our schools, and even we've extended that to the private schools, they all have not just internet, they all have high-speed internet. The service provider for that is Digicel. Generally speaking, it has been working extremely well. There are one or two cases, isolated cases that we continue to work on, but this is beautiful, right? In the OECS, in the CARICOM region, very few countries can speak to that. Now, this helps significantly when students are in school. Now, when students are home, the connectivity issue is a problem for some students. Some students, they have connection at home and they are able to access, and some parents will sacrifice their Facebook data and all of that and allow their children to get on with their classes. But I'm telling you, we do have parents who will not allow their children to use their data for no reason at all. What they're doing is far more important, and even go as far as to deny children an opportunity to connect and engage. Now, I have not heard of a case in Grenada, but I've heard colleagues in the region appealing publicly to uncles and aunties and mothers and fathers, please give the students their devices. Those that belong to them, please don't be using it for other stuff. You've gone to town and you've gone with their tablets and they're at home and they cannot connect. I pray this does not have to become a local situation. So the issue of connectivity, I believe, generally speaking, has to do with the most vulnerable among us. Generally speaking, students who have connectivity at home. So government has started and partnering with telecommunication companies and working on, and started in some cases, supporting vulnerable students. Right now, just as we consider electricity as a necessity for homes where there are children, particularly going to school, and we have been connecting electricity to home, assisting parents as a government initiative, we view internet services in the same way, because it has become a necessity for students right now, even outside of COVID, right? So that initiative has already started rolling out in supporting parents who need to have connectivity for their students to engage. But there is a challenge, and the challenge is worldwide. I looked at the statistics in the US and other places where persons do have the same issues, but we are addressing that. What is beautiful though, Brenda, is that most of the students, unlike where we were in March last year, because remember March last year, the major issue was not the connectivity. The major issue was availability of devices.
Right.
And 5 students in a house having to share one cell phone. Generally speaking, we've corrected that, and I believe we are leading in the region right now with regards to this initiative, right? Now, what we have done, and we've had the same situation with teachers who said that they cannot teach online because all they have is a cell phone and they probably don't even know how to get all this Zoom and all of that on that cell phone. So we've corrected that as well. We've addressed that. Every teacher was provided with a laptop to facilitate teaching and learning online. And we have provided to students last year between Form 1 and Form 5 and started the primary school level from grade 1 up to grade 5 devices. Now, some parents did not collect for different reasons. So I guess they didn't see it as an emergency. They didn't see it as something urgent. They probably could not have gotten the time off from work and all of that because it was done during work hours. And so what we did in this situation is that we have been making throughout the island available to parents an opportunity to pick up, and they have been responding beautifully. But all students within the system, from Form 5 last graduating class, all the way down to our students at the KG level, we have made those devices available. The students who would have been most affected not having a device when this upsurge took place were the students who were going into a new school. So you're going into Form 1, or you live in a preschool, private or public, and you're going into KG. These students would not have had an opportunity to have a device before September this year because, of course, you have to first enter your new school. They have to register you. They have to provide the list to the Ministry of Education. Between all of that, the upsurge came. Fortunately for us, there are still persons on the team who are not affected by COVID-19 that have been working feverishly with those two categories of persons to have each device configured for the particular child and at the same time rolling out the distribution. In addition to that, we've also started rolling out in collaboration with the Ministry of ICT, Office 365 for students. So Office 365 is where you get all of those Word and Excel and all of those tools to enhance your learning experience, right? On that, you also have Teams, which allows you to communicate classroom activities. So you don't have to be cutting off every 40 minutes on Zoom and so on. There is that service. And we're in the process of rolling that out. We've had another initiative prior to this where we've been able to secure Zoom accounts for the secondary schools. And so we have been pushing extremely hard. And I commend the team, highly motivated, working aggressively to roll out that e-learning agenda that is rebounding to students' advantage in the midst of a pandemic, rebounding to parents and, of course, teachers' advantage in this particular situation. So we continue to push on that. Yeah. Very soon, maybe within another week, we will be rolling out, launching our ebooks program. So we now have about 18 ebooks for secondary schools, and our major subjects for the primary, we are launching that as well, so that our students would be able to function even better online, having the content that is required online and having the content that doesn't require additional data. So a lot is happening in the background. There's a very hardworking, aggressive team, highly motivated, and I want to especially commend all of them this morning for all of the work that they've been doing to roll out this very challenging but very critical e-learning agenda during a pandemic.
Minister, I know you have cabinet. We have lots of questions left for you in this critical conversation on education that I know the national community needs to know. So I would suggest to the producer that we have a part 2 to this. And once you acquiesce and it relates to your availability, we would have to do this again because there's so much more that we need to know. But there's something I must ask you before you leave. It's been 2 years, frankly put, in this COVID scenario, and 2 years that has impacted children in ways, in mental ways, and not just, academics and all of that. So at the moment, the role of things like sports and recreation in the life of the school, that has been upended as students have been strictly online. and you're hearing that students are like 16, 14, 13 subjects a day that is being addressed. Can I ask this question? Are we delivering strictly academic material? Are we concentrating on having students do the softer things like, let's say, sharing their COVID experiences orally or written to help with their mental state? And another question that just popped into my head, I mean, is it absolutely necessary at this time that we just teach children academics, those exams, all of those things? How important are those at this time?
We are very concerned as the Ministry of Education with guarding contact time, whether it's during COVID, outside of COVID. Contact time is always important, and quality contact time. But with this particular situation of online learning, there's another concern, which is the amount of time that the child is interacting through a device. And so schools are aware that you want to manage that as much as possible. So a lesson that was 45 minutes does not have to be 45 minutes online, right? So we have given guidance, we have given support to schools in that regard. And so managing that time, managing the space between classes, it's critical, very, very important. And that is why the school-specific plan had to be submitted and approved by the Ministry of Education. Because if you don't set the parameters, if you don't set the boundaries as it relates to this, then everybody can go off on a tangent and just do their own thing. And it can end up with a good intention that turns out disastrous, right? So you're absolutely right. Now, even outside of COVID and online learning, a teacher is supposed to be able to manipulate the situation to know when to fit into that conversation something that is not totally academic. So let us use values as an example. Now, if I'm teaching, for example, going or let us say I'm doing subtraction and I'm teaching, for example, going to the shop and getting change and minusing and adding and so on. Now, I want to infuse into that lesson values. And the perfect value there is honesty. What if the shopkeeper gives you extra change? So it's the same concept. Now that we're in the COVID situation, now that we're doing online teaching and learning, that you would expect a teacher, the way that you start a lesson would be different. The way that you end a lesson would be different. How you engage students during the lesson, of course, would be different. But let us just be also realistic, Brenda, that all of our teachers are not trained. And so we rely on those who are trained and our principals to give as much support as possible to those who are not trained, which is why I'm extremely happy to end the answer to the question by saying we have started the process of pre-service training. And I'm extremely excited and happy about that Grenada has finally moved to introduce pre-service training where you can actually start training to be a teacher before you go into the classroom. And so all of those would help significantly because teacher education would change. Teacher education before never had anything significant about online learning and e-learning. That has to now become a critical component of teacher education. How do you engage students in different modes of teaching? And so I think it's
many things would change.
It's an unfortunate situation, but an excellent opportunity for transformation, for change, for, really doing all of those things that we have spoken a lot about. And, COVID has provided this excellent opportunity for innovation, creativity, and change. And we all have to tap in and grab that opportunity.
Absolutely. Transformation is the word. Education as we know it will change. And I'm happy to see that your head is already in that zone, because what we knew in the past, it probably won't obtain anyone. It's probably a really good opportunity to address our curriculum and all, delivery and all these things. Mr. Campbell had a final question before we let you go.
Minister, this is related, but it has to do with your other portfolio, information. clearly, what we have here is a public health issue, but communication and information is important. We have a vaccine update of 25,000 for double dose and about 10,000 for first dose. But clearly this is low compared to other countries, and Grenada is considered very low. From an information communication point of view, Minister, what ways and means do you see of us improving overall communication with the public, information to the public, particularly in this pandemic environment?
And I would preamble this by saying, Campbell, if we did not have social media, this probably would not even be a question this morning. We have to accept the fact that social media and misinformation and, access to information that is not credible has really interfered with persons' willingness to go out and to get vaccinated. And people give you all kinds of reasons why they are not going to get vaccinated. And of course, a lot of it are not sound scientifically, medically. And so that is where the challenge is. How do you beat the misinformation? The misinformation throughout the world is the biggest challenge of COVID-19, the biggest challenge of COVID-19, misinformation, because there's so much that is being lost amidst the misinformation that it makes it a major challenge to ensure that people understand what the facts are and people know what the facts are. But we continue to fight. The approach has been, so we've tried the traditional for many months. The posters, the flyers, the ads on the radio, all of those things. For many months, we used those traditional strategies. And recognizing the challenge that we had, some months ago, government's decision as it relates to information was to take a more community-based approach. So the meetings at the community level, interacting with the doctor right at the community level, the peer systems in the community, motivating and encouraging. And even right now, going out there with the campaign, but within the campaign, you also have the education component. So that hand-to-hand combat as it relates to education and information is one that we have to continue. But I want to plug in an appeal here that government by itself cannot do this. As a matter of fact, the more other people say it and the less government say it, we may see even better results. And that is why we should have far more support for government as it relates to the media, for example. So I have listened to some commentaries on radio and television and literally discouraging people from taking the vaccine. And sometimes you listen what is said and you wonder who is managing or who is advising, who is controlling, who is managing, right? And so we have to be on the same page as it relates to information. If the government is saying that you need to stay 6 feet apart and maintain physical distance to prevent the spread, of course, that's beautiful. But if somebody on a radio station or a disc jockey comes up and start playing a certain type of music and say, don't bother with the government, let's go out there and have a good time. We're stressed and we're depressed. Let's have a party. Turn on your radio, call your friend, come over. That's where the challenge is. And so we have to be on the same page as it relates to COVID-19, or else we would lose the fight. We would lose this battle if we don't unite our efforts and if we don't find ways to be singing from the same hymn book, and not just the same hymn book, from the same page. So it is very important. But also misinformation from another angle, I just want to mention, because I sometimes turn on the radio and sometimes, with a good heart, genuinely so, you hear persons saying certain things and totally inaccurate, but you know that they have the information is shared. And so we all have to take responsibility for educating ourselves, especially when we have certain rules. So I am sure that you're on this program, you've taken the time to read, to learn, to understand, to know. And so when you communicate, You are communicating what is fact. You communicating what is educational, what is appropriate, what is relevant. And so every single person in a position needs to support the efforts of government. I didn't say support the government, the efforts of government as it relates to ensuring that we can get out of this situation.
All right.
So whether you're black, you're white, you're green, you're blue, you're yellow, NNP, NDC, PLM, whatever there is, right? Every single organization, every single person need to understand that Grenada will lose. Grenada, I didn't say NNP or the government of Grenada, Grenada will lose if we don't find a way to collaborate, to pull our energies, our efforts, our skills, our resources together to fight COVID-19. The enemy is COVID. And unless we understand that, we're going to continue fighting each other. We're going to continue finding reasons to pull away and to pull apart rather than pulling our energies together to defeat the enemy. I mean, it's the strategic approach that is required here. We're in battle. And in a battle, soldiers don't go opposite direction. You're going to lose that. I mean, you're going to die in the process. And this is exactly what is going to happen, or what is happening actually, because we have not grabbed the opportunity to pull our resources and energies together to understand who the real enemy in this is and to fight that real enemy with all that we have. And that's my encouragement. We have an enemy. Let's team up and fight COVID. Let us team up and fight COVID. And one of the weapons that we have in this fight, my husband is a police officer, forgive me if you find I sound a bit military. One of the weapons that we have is truly vaccination. Are we going to use it? Or are we going to take the option of losing the battle or dying?
Right. We're going to pick up on that the next time we see you. Already I am committing you to part 2. And not your press secretary or anything like that. And not your PA or anything like that. But I am committing you to part 2 in the interest of the national community. That we continue this conversation on education. There are so many other questions we have for you. We want to know about examination, CXC, what those results are going to look like. The kind of conversations you're having now in the budget consultations. Are you talking to the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Sports? What sort of policy are we putting in place to holistically deal with our teachers, students, and parents as we move into this new time? So you must come back for part 2. That'll be next Monday?
I'm obliged, Brenda, I'm obliged. I find it difficult to say no in this situation.
Oh, there we go. There we go. I know a certain person will be proud of me. We were trained to do things like this. Thank you so much, Minister. Before you leave us, your parting words, 60 seconds.
I want to thank you for the opportunity and just to encourage Grenadians in 60 seconds. Let us go out there, make the right choice. Let us do what is best for Grenada. Let us do what is best for our loved ones, the people we care about, our grandparents who are lying in bed and cannot go outside. Let us make a choice for them. Let us make a choice for our children who cannot take the vaccine. Let us make a choice that our children would be able to go back out and to start receiving an education in the way that we know best, face to face. So I encourage everyone, if you have not yet been vaccinated, use this opportunity to do so. You'll be doing something not just for yourself, but for Grenada, for those that you care about. That's my 60 seconds. I hope you took it back.
Well, you did it in about 40. Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. It was a pleasure to have you on with us, first time on Perspectives, and also a pleasure to have had the GIS audience with us because the minister is on. Anytime a minister comes on from henceforth, the GIS will cover this live. So please extend our commendations to your team. We know it's a lot for folks at the ministry, and by extension, the teaching community, students, and the parents, of course. And we look forward to seeing you next Monday, same time, same place. Have a great day. Have a productive cabinet. Have a productive cabinet meeting.
I know. I'm going to say to the Prime Minister, Brenda, Allie and Campbell is to be blamed because I'm running late.
Oh, what you could tell him though is that Brenda said that she hoped that was the last lockdown no movement weekend.
I'm gonna try to communicate that.
Gosh, tell him that all we want 7 o'clock every night. We all right with that? 7 p.m.
I'm gonna just do the duty of communicating.
Tell him, yes. Not that Brenda have any say in the matter, but Brenda feels how Brenda feels about Brenda. So let me hope this is the last no movement. But tell him we go behave.
All right. I believe you, and so I'll communicate that message because I believe you.
Thanks,
Have a
Minister.
blessed day. God
Have a
bless.
good one.
You too, Minister.
Thank
Gentlemen.
Bye-bye. Have a good day. All the
Gentlemen.
best. Bye-bye.
Well, you know, Brenda, listening to our minister and how well she articulated, you know, woman's power. I want to say that.
Aye, sir.
And, you know, when we see what's happening in the region of women
Yeah.
leaders, and here's a woman leader in our cabinet handling education, and that is a complex issue.
Very.
It's a complex area of the whole situation in COVID and how it's unfolding. And from my listening to our minister, she seems to be on top of the issues, and she seems to be handling and understanding all the various complicated issues that come. So I want to commend her,
Yeah.
commend her team in
Yeah.
the Ministry of Education and everybody around her that is helping to, you know, keep this situation in control, because that is important. And I mean, the most I could say, you know, kudos to the woman power. Here's another excellent woman of ours, leader that is doing
Listen,
so well. I think,
don't
and
come
making
off
us
woman
proud.
yet. I must congratulate you, through you, congratulate your wife. She was at this UN meeting on Friday, right, from across the Caribbean. They were talking about the role of the private sector, and she did such a fantastic job. So congratulations, Mrs. Allie, Managing Director of Republic Bank Limited, happens to be the life partner of this gentleman here. So kindly extend congratulations.
I certainly
Yeah,
will.
it was a really good forum.
Yeah.
There was another woman on there, Mala Dukaran.
Yes.
She was
Economist.
excellent. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's really excellent.
Yeah.
Yes, we have some strong women in the region.
No question, no doubt about it, man. Everywhere. But I too, like you, Chris, was quite impressed with the minister's take on the whole issue. I like the fact that she's thinking in military terms, which means that,
do like that
which
too.
means that she's thinking strategic and tactfully, you know.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing, first of all, you know, going forward the priorities. But I think, I mean, a big part of the conversation had to do with the job requirement going forward for the education system, because I mean, as she said, we have to get back to the classrooms, you know.
Yes.
Because of the, it is true, and I want to compliment the ministry for, it's a big deal in terms of the tablets, the laptops, the technology out there. But a lot of students are not being supervised at home. Their parents are working. You know, think
Yes.
about that.
Yeah.
And not all students have the supervision or the internet, and so
Correct.
it's loose in a lot of areas, but there's a big effort by the ministry.
Yeah.
But it means that this has to be seen as temporary.
The best
And we
option
have
is
to-
still
best option,
physical.
we have to get back.
Yeah.
And I don't see us getting back, Chris. That's my view. Without mandatory vaccination, because we have mandatory vaccinations for children for less deadly diseases. You know.
Yeah, well, to enter
You
school,
understand?
you have to be
Exactly.
vaccinated.
So what's the deal? What's the situation with COVID-19? And I mean, that's the
Yeah.
issue. So I was making a point about the conversation. It has to be now sitting down with the union and say, look, this is where we have to go. Because it's happening in other territories, in other countries.
Yeah, people
It's
need to
become
hear from each other.
mandatory.
Yeah,
You want to
absolutely.
get back into the classroom, you have to be vaccinated.
Yeah, but we have to help government as well. I mean,
Absolutely.
all of us.
Yes,
as
our
leaders have to help.
conversations.
Yeah.
The
Cannot just be
conversations need to
government.
be
Yeah.
what are the safest ways, just to adopt
Yeah.
from Trinidad, because I
Yeah.
think that was so smart.
Yeah.
The messaging. What are the safest ways to do this?
Yeah.
And we
So
have to
whenever
help
you
government.
engage people to have the conversations
Yeah.
about their industries
Yeah.
or whatever,
Yeah.
guys, what are the safest ways for us to do this?
Yeah.
And just allow people to put it on the table. I think in the end, we're all going to get to that place.
Yes.
How we get there, though, is how we the tone and the mode by which we engage.
But the hotel sector have
You
done
know?
it.
So-
Tourism sector
Well, I
have done
mean,
it.
Yeah.
I would.
Well,
I
to
would.
me,
It's you
so
get
easy for
done.
everybody.
So it's
yeah.
doable.
I am called Reserve mandatory vaccination. That's what I'm being told. So
Well, I'm in
I
your
wouldn't say
footsteps, Chris. I mean, you convinced me.
you know, but I don't think we play in Russian roulette with our children.
Yeah.
And it's a whole total thing. Education is a total thing.
Listen,
It's not just academics.
Yeah,
It's not
no.
just, and we remember a lot of the relationship between boy and girl and how we deal with that relationship with boy and girl is in school. It starts in school. How we interact with the opposite
Listen,
sexes.
as
and
I
so on.
prepared,
It's a real total thing.
As I prepared for this interview this morning, I was taken back mentally to how I was at school. I was a real free. I liked outside, I loved to interact, and I just thought about and it's been 2 years. It's been
It's a
2
long time.
years.
And-
And that's why I asked the question about whether what we're delivering in terms of material is strictly academic.
Yeah.
Because there may be some students that this thing is not reaching. They have not been playing sport. They're not outside.
But Brenda,
they probably don't even have the bean bag in the
don't-
classroom anymore.
Don't underestimate
You know?
the effect on parents.
Exactly.
That is a huge
So it is
change for
it-
parents. Huh?
Correct. So
Sending your child to
is a
school
lot.
from 8 till 3 or 2, whatever the thing.
Yeah.
That
It is a
parents
lot.
also need a break as well. And the
it's a
strain
lot.
of managing work, managing
So-
taking care of your child, and know how to manage their education at home.
Yeah.
A lot of them are not equipped.
So if we're
And
gonna
it's
be
a
online, you
huge-
know?
it's a huge thing for
And that's
our
why I talk
parents as
about
well.
the post-COVID, you know? Are we going to be delivering 16 subjects a day? Do we need 14 ones?
But I like the point.
These are the conversations
I like
we
the
had to
point you
have.
made, Brenda, meaning that it should be all academic. There could
No,
be other exchanges
yeah.
within the students sharing their experiences. Because remember that the psychological impact is enormous. We're going to see the fallout of this both in terms of education and
Minister-
tell you.
Minister
downstream.
educated, yeah.
In
I mean,
1983,
Yeah.
after the assassination of the Prime Minister,
Yeah.
October 19th and October 25th,
Yeah.
when we returned to school at the Anglican High School, that week, our teachers, Mrs. Martino in particular, at history, Mrs. Danielle in English, those teachers wanted to know our experience.
Yeah,
When we went back to school, there were friends that we did not have around.
yeah,
Some of them went to the fort, they got injured.
yeah,
So school helped me through
yeah,
that.
yeah.
You know where I live, so
Yeah.
I was in the battle zone.
Yeah.
You know, I saw dead soldiers. So writing, journaling these stories, talking to the children in the class about these stories were important. The last day we met as a school, when October 19th, when the GBSS boys came up, the GBSS and technical and vocational and
Yeah.
IFE
Yeah.
students came up and got the Anglican
Yeah.
high school girls.
Yeah.
When Mr. Baptiste called us together at assembly, there were about 12 of us. And he asked us to please go home. He don't think this day would end well and that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So when we got back to school, we actually picked up there. People started to talk about their experiences over the time before we got back to academics.
Yeah, yeah.
It is, and that's why I say preparing for the interview over the weekend brought me back to that time. And here we are in October.
Yeah.
And so I just think, you know, Hurricane Ivan, it was the same thing. Children, a lot of students
Trauma.
were asked to write about their Ivan
Trauma.
experiences
Yeah,
and
management
so
of
on.
trauma.
So I think it is a useful thing to happen in this dispensation. COVID has done so many things. You know, so hearing things from the child's mind, from, you know, the teachers, you know, if children need to cry, they should be able to cry with their teacher, but the space have to be created for it. So it is a lot, and we really have to help each other along.
So I hear you making a call for opening up the weekend. Senator, you also
can't go
making
more.
this call. You really believe that the time is nigh?
Well, you know, Byron, I said so before. I believe we could open back up.
Yeah.
The strain on the businesses that have been
Yeah.
closed have been significant and enormous.
Yeah.
Some of them probably at the point of collapse. And I know government have a stimulus package, but that is not enough.
like relief,
Yes,
no?
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we need to open up. I mean, we need to, I think we could use the curfew to play it, as Brenda indicated,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, 7
use the
o'clock.
curfew to maintain some level of control, but we need to open it back and get people I mean, economic activity is hinged on people moving as well. But
Yeah.
COVID loves people to move.
Yeah.
So we need to balance it, and I understand
some
that.
control.
Wants you to move.
And part of the understanding with our people is that, we need to follow the protocols, the mask wearing and so on properly. And that, if we do that, I think we could keep the numbers where it are and head it back down the place where we want it to be. And I think that we have done well to manage it in these 4 weekends that we have locked down.
I think
And the curfews,
everything they
yeah.
wanted to. If you never believed in epidemiology,
Yeah.
these 4 weekends, what has happened in
There's a science
Grenada
to it, yeah.
has really proven.
And it proves the point
Yeah.
that COVID needs people to move and
Correct.
to spread.
But then that's just one side of the coin.
so
Because
we
now
need
the
to-
world is telling you, well, you have to let the epidemiology work. What about the human side? What about the
Yeah.
business side? So it's just calling on us
Well, you
to
see in many
balance.
countries opening back up totally.
Yeah. So we have
because
to.
The thinking is that COVID is here for the next 5 years. We didn't talk to that about the minister and how education is going to
She's
evolve.
coming back next week.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we if you take all of that into consideration, we have to live with this virus.
Absolutely.
As we live with other viruses. And
Absolutely.
the question is management.
Absolutely.
And the management starts with us.
Absolutely.
Going in front of the mirror,
behavior.
pointing the finger and see who it points at. It
Individual
starts with us.
behavior.
Yeah, it starts
But I'm
with us.
seeing generally good compliance around in terms of persons wearing face masks.
People are trying. People are trying.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think,
yeah, yeah.
and I think what's driving that, we all know now someone, a family member or a
The
friend
deaths, the
who's
deaths,
died.
the deaths, yeah.
We know this now,
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps to adjust our behavior.
Yeah.
It's not business.
I mean, we
as
didn't have to
Continue.
walk into the fire to know it's
No,
fire, but
no,
it is
but-
what it is, you know.
We have to pray and hope that it continues.
Yeah.
We have to continue. We have to. Don't mind things are the curve is flattening, but remember this is just our first wave, and we have to continue with the
Well,
protocols.
according to them fellas, we don't need another wave. It's like a ripple if anything.
Oh God, Lord.
We don't want to move.
I know. So let's continue to watch our distance, wash our hands, you know, and continue
And
to
vaccinate.
And
yes,
vaccinate. That's the big
and
deal.
yes, Dr. Noel's his fourth strategy.
Yeah.
Vaccinate.
Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah.
Darla
Yes.
Noel from the
Yeah.
press conference last week. Yes, his fourth strategy. Yeah, to vaccinate. So that's it. Just a programming note to let you know that Perspectives will be coming to you live this Wednesday evening from 8 to 10 o'clock. We have a big program, massive, huge, enormous. We want to hear from the different sectors across Grenada just how we are coming out of this wave that has thrown us on the sand, the rock, and everywhere else in between. So we're going to be having a special edition of Perspectives on Wednesday evening, Perspectives Prime. So please join us here for that. I'd like to thank the Minister of Education, the Honorable Emmalin Pierre, for appearing as a special guest panelist this morning. To all the broadcast entities who brought us live, we appreciate it. Perspectives Prime, just in case you want to know, is going to be from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Wednesday evening. And we'll be streaming across the various platforms who bring us live. So thanks, everyone. Have a very, very good day. MTV on air and online, we thank you. Mikey Live, Partygrenada, TNR Communications, Sister I, the GIS who came in for the first time this morning as we had the minister with us, and to everyone else who brought us KG9. Thank you so very much. Nazim Benjamin for your professional streaming services. Thank you. Kirk Oliver, who provided our camera services. Thank you so much, Kirk. Blondell George, our director. Richie Oliver, our executive producer. And for these expert talk panel here of Senator Christopher Allie and Mr. Byron Campbell.
In person.
In person, Mr. Byron Campbell, in person, in the flesh. I am Brenda Baptiste. Have a good day, everybody. Stay positive. Stay COVID negative. Have a good one. Until we meet again. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.
For persons with symptoms of COVID-19, testing is done within 5 days of the start of symptoms using a SARS-CoV-2 antigen test. If the result is positive, individuals are required to isolate for 14 days. Day 1 of isolation is the day of confirmation with a positive test. Retesting is not required for release from isolation. Once persons complete the required 14-day isolation, they can resume normal activities, observing routine public health protocols. If the result is negative, a PCR test will be done for confirmation. If the PCR test is positive, the individual is required to isolate for 14 days as above. If the PCR test is negative, the individual will be released from quarantine and can resume normal activities observing routine public health protocols.